sense, and so didn't see any reason not to bring it forward.
I'll make a motion that we approve resolution 1803-5.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Member Friend seconds the motion. Is there discussion? I think some of the statistics in here are pretty frightening. 16% of the high school students reported carrying a weapon during the previous month. 4% reported carrying a weapon on campus during the previous month. That's not good. But you've heard in the course of this discussion tonight, we've had many references to school safety and student safety. So I am glad that it is on our radar and that we're working, and I am certainly in favor of this resolution. So no further discussion. Mrs. Held, will you tally the vote, please?
President Drew?
Aye.
Member Wilson?
Aye.
Member Brownell?
Aye.
Member Wright?
Aye.
Member Friend?
Aye.
Next thing on the agenda is Resolution 1803-6, a resolution intending to terminate certificate employees due to a reduction of particular kinds of services. That's a mouthful. Again, Superintendent Scott?
Resolution.
Superintendent Smith, excuse me.
On a first name basis here.
Bringing forward this resolution as my recommendation moving forward, so that the district has the flexibility that it needs, staffing wise moving forward.
Is there a motion to approve the resolution?
I'll make a motion to approve the resolution.
Member Wright moves and Member Wilson seconds that we approve the resolution. Is there discussion?
I have a question. Does that leave us with a 0.34, or do we still have a full-time FTE?
Does that leave us?
I'm just saying 1 minus 0.66 would be 0.37. So do we still have a math 1.0 FTE, or do we just have, is that gonna leave us with then just a 0.34 math person?
No, it will not leave us with a 0.34.
Let me try to clarify. I think the incumbent is a 0.66 FTE employee, is that correct?
On a resolution like this, we are reducing FTE. This isn't about a particular employee.
Okay, so it is, I guess my confusion then, when it says we're reducing 0.66 of a math position, how much of a math position does that leave us with left to teach the middle school kids?
How much does that leave us?
Well, we've got to have a math position still.
How many FTE math positions do we have now?
Yes. Well, after this, if we pass this.
Okay, so this is my recommendation to approve this resolution. And I'm not getting into personnel issues and staffing in open session.
I'm not asking a staffing question. I'm just asking if do we have a math position left on campus?
I've made my recommendation and that's all I'm willing to say at this point.
I'm going to ask a question again that I think is a matter of fact. It's not. What is the staffing of the middle school math program now in terms of FTEs? We've approved that staffing recommendation. I don't have it with me, and I would appreciate it if you would provide us with that information.
Okay. I am not prepared to talk in open session about staffing, particularly in a district this size. I don't know what else to say other than that. I think it would be inappropriate for me to do so.
I agree with talking about, yes, you can't, but I guess I'm just still, I don't understand this. Does that leave us with a math person? So I can't vote for something that I don't understand.
Well, I would guess Scott's doing this because we have more staff than we need to teach middle school math.
I'm not comfortable with guessing if I can't understand it.
Well, bottom line is it comes down to, are you as a board gonna allow the superintendent to manage the staff at this site? Or is the board gonna manage the staff at this site themselves? That's what this comes down to. It would be inappropriate for me to get into staffing levels and individual personnel issues, particularly in this size of a district in open session.
So how do we move on?
Well,
What's the bureaucratic proper way of moving on?
well, we have a motion. It's been
Then I'll
seconded.
second the motion.
It's been seconded.
Okay, so
So
then,
this was discussion on the motion. So is there further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Mrs. Held, would you record the vote, please?
Member Wilson,
Aye.
member Brownell,
aye.
member Wright,
Aye.
member Friend,
No, because I don't understand it.
member, President Drew,
Aye. Okay, we're going to go back to the agenda item that was originally 9.7, but it was pulled from the consent agenda. And this is a proposal from DKW, Dennis Walliver Kelly, one of the better-known education law firms in the state, to provide professional services for it. In particular, I had a discussion with Roman Munoz, who many of you know. He used to be our counsel here. He was our counsel here for a number of years. He's a person who, in my opinion, always provided us with good counsel. And I think he's a very well-respected and has a statewide known reputation. I found myself in a situation where I needed some help. I needed some legal, there was the potential that I would need legal advice. In this case, I wanted to be able to call on an attorney who is at arm's length from us. He hasn't dealt with us in 2 or 3 years. I consulted with Scott, I consulted with Jim Brescia, and then I called Roman Munoz, and he said that he would be willing and able to do work for us on request. And he said, I'll send you my agreement for professional services, and if you approve it, then we can have a professional relationship. So I've had one 10 or 10-minute conversation with him. We don't have anything that's pending right now. It's one more legal resource that I think it's important for the district to have access to. And that's why it's here. So is there a motion to approve the agreement?
Susan, Can I ask you something? You're the one that wanted this pulled.
Well,
Do you have a
I'm
concern?
concerned about
They're gonna
how
have to
many
wait.
attorneys we have and how come we all need to consult with yet another attorney? Like what more is coming down the pipe that is threatening our district? Or you, that you would need an attorney for? Like what's
It's
the
not
new
for me
threat?
personally, it's
Then what's
for
the
the
new
district.
threat for the district?
I'm sorry?
What is the new threat to the district? That
Um,
we need yet another attorney?
I'm not aware of any threat at this time. I think it's important for us to have the best advice possible that we could have to preserve and protect the reputation of the district and make sure that if there are difficult times, things don't get out of hand.
I've known.
Okay,
Roman-
we should really have a motion before we have more
Oh, I
discussion.
thought we did.
I'm just getting concerned about how much money is being spent on
Okay,
attorneys.
well, let's get over that so we can discuss it. So I'll make a motion that we approve this,
And I'll
this
second
agreement.
it.
Okay, so Member Wilson has moved, Member Wright has seconded, so now we have a motion on the table. Ms. Brownell, Member Brownell?
Just a waste of district money, but
I-
if you feel like we
It-
need it, everybody feels like we need it, then let's
A couple
get
of things
another one.
I'd like to clarify. First of all, Roman has had a relationship with the district for, well, it was a decade. He hasn't recently, but a decade. He knows the district really well. And this doesn't cost anything to sign this. There's no retainer. It's just when something comes up, you have somebody to call. And the other attorneys, it's like our legal backing, numerous attorneys that backed us, gave us information for the MOU. They can still be called if there was something related to that, to unification, but because that was their specialty. Now these other for other things we might need, and so they're just in place. Instead of something comes up, you call them, and also they aren't representing somebody else at the same time. You have them as a resource. You don't have to spend any money till you need to. So again, this has been
Does this person have a specialty that is different than any other attorney that we've had?
You mean Randy Erickson? Is that who you're thinking of?
The person,
I don't know who you mean by the other attorney.
well, the one you are proposing from Daniels.
This is
Wallaber
Roman.
and
Oh,
Kelly.
That's Roman on that
Roman
contract.
Munoz?
Oh, okay, see, I don't know,
Right, that's,
that's
that's,
not there,
it's
It
in the
is.
contract,
It's
if
way
it's
down
on
at the
the,
bottom.
I see.
right, so he would be the
That's the
actual
firm
lawyer,
Got
and
it.
that's who he works for.
Okay,
As Mr. Wilson said, and as I said, he has a long association with the district. He's been very helpful to us at times when we've had conflict in the district. He's somebody with whom Mr. Wilson, member friend, and I have all had significant experience. But right now he's at arm's length from the district. So he's not involved in anything that we do. And you perhaps have met him, but you've not had significant professional dealings with him. Is that correct?
I believe I have met him somewhere along the way.
one of the other.
I'm fine with approving it.
I had a question. On, he does work for Coast right now. I mean, I know Ron, you said he doesn't have a relationship with other districts, but he started working for Coast in June of 17. And it's been less than a decade that he's worked for us. It was when Ann was here that he was with us.
He started in '01.
Oh, I thought you meant he hasn't worked for us for a decade.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, no, he's been more recent, but.
We have had a relationship for a decade.
He stopped working for us 2 years ago. Some of us
Oh.
remember in San Diego,
Yeah.
we were at CSBA, and we went to a very nice cocktail party sponsored by the firm he used to work for then. That was on Friday night. On Saturday night, they announced they were disbanding their education division and their lawyers scattered to the wind. And he moved from, he used to live here, so he was readily accessible. Now he lives in Sacramento. He's not readily accessible anymore. And that's why, the only reason we severed our relationship with him.
But also my concern is that he has worked for all the districts. He's worked for San Luis Coastal.
Except there, other people have worked for other people, so if there was a conflict of interest, we have another attorney who's not on retainer, but we have an agreement with, so you have those things you can go to. We might have, we're not having any issues with other districts, but we might have something in the future where Randy would be the person to go to because of a different conflict of interest. It doesn't cost us anything, and he has a really good track record, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, we still will pay for the calls that you had with them.
I'm sorry?
You said it's not gonna cost us to sign it, but we still have to pay for the.
No. No, that was is there a
Professional courtesy,
conflict?
okay.
Do you have a,
I see.
that was a free call?
Should we take a vote?
Because we didn't have an agreement.
Should we
I'm sorry?
take a vote?
Sure, there's still discussion items. Are we ready to end the discussion? Mrs. Held, would you record the vote, please?
Member Brownell,
Aye.
Member Wright,
Aye.
Member Friend,
Aye.
Member Drew,
Aye,
Member Wilson.
thank you. Next item on the agenda is review and approve the second interim progress report. The second interim report. Superintendent Smith.
Thank you, President Troop. So Ms. Held's gonna pull up our multi-year projection. I think that
And what page is that, please?
7 or 8. It's the one with red and black ink.
It's a landscape.
That's it.
Yeah. So obviously at first interim, we were looking at the possibility of our reserve level being at 13% for 18-19, 10.5, and 19-20, 9%. I have been working to try and
Towards the front.
trim some things off of our budget, and that's how we get to this point. So instead of it being a flat 13, we're predicting 13.2 this year. Next fiscal year, instead of it being 10.5, 12.69. And in the 19-20 school year, instead of it being 9%, 12.04. So while some of the current budget adjustments that we've made are working, we still are projecting pretty significant deficit spending, and so that's still needs to be corrected. Some of the factors that we need to look at, if you'll look towards the bottom on the net change, in this fiscal year under second interim, it predicts a $478,000 deficit. I want to point out to the board and the public that $225,000 of that is the solar and lighting project from Prop 39 money, because that came in a prior fiscal year. So it kind of artificially stimulated our ending balance in 2 prior fiscal years, which I'll show you in a minute. And then it artificially stimulates our deficit spending in this fiscal year.
So that's the capital outlay above that, that was the 225, that's why it goes to
Exactly.
0 in the next one?
Exactly.
Okay, that was smart.
And I just want to repeat what you said. Unfortunately, there was no flag raised in 15-16 and 16-17, when we got the income from the Prop 39 funds, we got those early, and I think, if I correctly remember our discussion, if that were to happen now, we wouldn't have put them into Fund 01. We would have put them into the Capital Facilities Fund, and then pulled them out this year, but we didn't know they had gone into Fund 01.
Yeah, I have to go back and pull reports on when those funds came in, and so, I'll share with you on the following slide. Because I have a little more information than since we talked, I think. So some of the things that are impacting that, also is that, we had, we expanded our middle school schedule because of the 38 eighth graders we had this year. That impacted it a little bit. Also things that impacted it, that's a one-time purchase. We purchased that ELA curriculum, turned out to be close to $60,000. So that also artificially stimulated our deficit spending in this fiscal year. The other things that are likely to have positive impact on it is if the taxes come up to what they came in at last year, property taxes at 6.65, because this is based off of a 4.89 projection this year and 4% in the following years. If it comes in at 6.65, which it did last year, we would also see an increase of $44,000 in revenues in this fiscal year. Also, we would expect some money to drop out of this at the end of the fiscal year and drop back into Fund 01 from unspent budgets. And so, Ms. Held, would you pull up that document? In the out years, I want to show you two things. First off, this first thing up on the projector shows what our increased cost is going to be for staff for next fiscal year. Could you scroll down a little bit so we could see that whole chart? So, yeah, that's perfect right there. On the left is the item, and on the right is the percent increase. So while it's not exact, approximately when people move between steps, there's a 3% on the salary schedule. We're also facing a 1.85% for retirement next year. We're facing, there's an increase in the statutory costs due to those step and column, because you have about a 35% on top of that for statutory costs on that step increase. So there's another 1.05%. We also are committed to a 1% salary increase next year. So that's an additional percent plus the statutory cost from that 1% salary increase. So if you add that all together, what it costs us next year in our budget is going to be 7.25% increase in cost for employees. So that's part of what's driving the multi-year projection problems. The other thing is, in the fiscal year, I was looking at this and I was going back and saying, do these numbers really pan out in the long run? So I went back and looked historically, because we're working with the same person setting up the budget at the County Office of Ed. She's always said she runs a conservative budget. I've always reported that it's a conservative budget. When you run a conservative budget, you make sure that there's enough money in those budgets to pay for those items. So it can't be exact, it's never exact, so, every little thing gets padded a little bit. Well, if you look at second interim from the previous 4 years, and then the unaudited actual fund balance at the end of the year, you'll notice money that drops out of those budgets back into the general fund. In 13-14, it was 191,000. However, that year, 50,000 of it was Prop 39 funds. So what really dropped out of the budget was 140,000. Yeah, stay right there, you're in the right spot. In 14-15, 222,000 dropped out of the budget and back into Fund 01, which increased the ending fund balance in the actuals. In 15-16, it was at 179,000, and then in last fiscal year it was 331,000. However, $204,000, I believe, of that was Prop 39 funds that came in at the beginning of last fiscal year that I didn't know hit our books that fiscal year. I thought they had hit our books in the previous year. So that was actually news to me, because that happened, I believe, it may have happened, I'm not sure the exact date, but it may have happened before October, my start date. But bottom line is, you subtract the 204 in Prop 39 funds, you still are having 125,000 fall back into Fund 01 at the end of the fiscal year. So the trend over the last 4 years is we're having between 125 and 150,000 at the end of the year in these budgets that have been built fall back into Fund 01. So when we go back to the, so could you go to the next slide? I'm sorry, did you already move down? Could you go back up? Oh no, there it is.
For
What's
Hannah.
going on? It got split.
Unfortunately, it's on 2 pages, right?
Oh, that's what's going on, okay.
Yeah.
So I wanted to see,
Let's
is
do a page
that
break on that.
because of a big change in our revenues or because of a big change in our expenditures, right? Confirming that there's a little extra in the budget that falls back into Fund 01 at the end of the year so that we can look and see how bad our current year is. And go back up a little bit so I can see what the titles are on that. Yeah, at second interim, those estimated expenditures are there, and you can see the difference, 158,000 coming in under budget on our actual expenditures in 13-14. 14-15, we came in 137 under budget. 15-16, 127 under budget, and then 16-17, 277 under budget. So bottom line is, historical trends would tell us that we would expect about 150,000, I think, to drop out of our budget at the end of the fiscal year and help cover some of this projected deficit spending in this fiscal year. So the projected deficit spending was 478. If you subtract the 225 of the Prop 39 funds, and you drop another 125 or 150 of what will most likely be unspent budget, you start erasing a lot of that deficit spending pretty quickly. And there was one other item I'm forgetting to mention. Oh, and the one-time expenditures of the 60,000 in ELA curriculum. So while we are still expecting to have some deficit spending, I don't expect it to be near as bad after looking at these historical trends as what this second interim is showing. I do think though, however, that after the first interim report in next fiscal year, if the first interim report doesn't look a lot better than this, moving forward, we're gonna have to make some difficult decisions come next fall to make sure that this deficit spending doesn't continue into the future. other things that I wanna mention,
Can I ask you?
go ahead.
Does this second interim include the staffing changes that you know are gonna happen? Any reduction in expenditures for staff?
No,
Okay, so that's another.
that would affect multi-year.
Right.
That wouldn't affect this budget this year, though.
No, I meant going forward.
Right, but it's not baked into the multi-year.
Right, that was my question.
You know, honestly, I don't like bringing forward that resolution to reduce certificated staff. However, the timing on all this is just really poor. The fact of the matter is that I got these final numbers on Wednesday. Had to post agenda Friday. So,
And the notification has to be at the end of the month.
notification has to be tomorrow.
Oh, tomorrow.
So that's why I felt like I had to do what I did to provide the district with the flexibility it needs moving forward. On top of those things, we are, losing the library lease, actually March 8th, it's already expired. And we are going to $1 a year, so that's $16,000 a year that we've been, seeing from them is no longer in the out years. They did approach me though, and they want to renegotiate, and so I'm working with Melanie and Ismail to, by Friday, I hope to provide a proposal to them to renegotiate that contract for maintenance expenses, because they're supposed to take over all the maintenance. They don't want to, and I would say it's also in our best interest to not have someone else maintaining our building. So we're gonna come up with cost estimates for maintenance and supplies, and renegotiate that whole agreement with them. I did not approach them, they approached us.
The library.
The county, yes.
There still are buildings, there's a long-term lease.
The other thing is, with Mrs. Mathias's retirement, what's built into this projection going forward is a new full-time FTE at a little bit higher than about mid-range of our salary schedule, so that's a total ballpark estimate of 58,000. Could come in, I wouldn't expect it to come in higher than that, but could come in lower. And I think that's it, but I'd be happy to answer questions if I can.
Is there any further discussion?
Do we have a motion?
No, I'm gonna ask. We had a presentation, we're having a discussion. So is there a motion to approve the second interim report?
I make a motion to approve the second.
Member Wilson?
Ugh.
I haven't seconded anything in a long, long time. I will second that motion. Is there further discussion? Ms. Held, will you record the vote, please?
Member Wright?
Aye.
Member Friend?
Aye.
President Tru?
Aye.
Member Wilson?
Aye.
Member Brownell?
Aye. The heater's not working in here.
It would take about a month.
Big building.
Is
It's not
everybody
like home.
coughing and-
Yeah, that's uncomfortable.
Okay, that's the last item on the open session agenda. We're going to reconvene in closed session.
We do some jumping jacks first?
No, no, no.
Take a lap.